two different books. Likewise, Irenaeus never mentioned the Gospel of Barnabas, but he did mention glowingly the Epistle of Barnabas. So this confusion's going on. As for Jerome's Latin Vulgate, anyone with a passing familiarity with the Latin Vulgate and with the Gospel of Barnabas as we have it today knows there's absolutely no connection whatsoever. There is no mention anywhere in Christian literature of a Gospel of Barnabas prior to the year 500. And then we have only the title appearing in the Galatian Decree, which is a list of books prohibited by the Roman Catholic Church. All we have is the title. We have no text whatsoever, just a title. And that's the first mention anywhere in the year 500. Now, whether the book we have today is the same as that book that was banned in the year 500 is very questionable. There's absolutely no way to confirm it. But the other thing I would point out to you, brother, if we look at the absolute provenance of the Gospel of Barnabas, we can only take it back a few centuries. Now, supposedly, a Father Moreno stole this book from the Vatican Library. This is the story we're told, right? And his whole provenance rests on this Father Moreno. Brother, if I were to give you a hadith, quote to you a hadith, in which you knew that one person in that isnad is a self-confessed thief, would you accept that hadith? No. We can't accept the provenance of the Gospel of Barnabas either any further back than about 300 years. Most likely it's a complete fake and forgery. We don't need it either. I mean, we really don't. There's more than enough legitimate Christian writings from the early times, from the New Testament itself, when we go back to the earliest sources. We don't need it at all. As to the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Thomas was discovered in Nag Hammadi, Egypt in the 1940s. This is a fascinating book. It has some obvious later Gnostic interpolations in it, or additions to it. But those are easy to spot. They're very obvious. And if you throw out those Gnostic interpolations, what you have left is a Q-source document. Now, in Bible scholarship, it's typically maintained that the first gospel that was written was Mark, or Proto-Mark, and that both Matthew and Luke copied from Mark, but they also copied from another document that they both had, which is called Q. And this is simply a list of sayings. You know, Jesus, peace be upon him, said, boom. Jesus, peace be upon him, said, boom. And Thomas, obviously, is a Q-source document. And it gives us, in places, perhaps some more original wording in some of those sayings than we can find in Matthew and Luke. It also allows us to see that Mark, some of the passages that we thought Matthew and Luke took from Mark may in fact have been taken from Q, because there are some Q statements in Mark we now know because of Thomas.
Okay, there's a question. I think it means the difference between the Injil and the teachings of Jesus. The question says, were the teachings of Jesus oral, or was there something in writing in Christian belief?
Well, the teachings of Jesus were oral, that much we know. So certainly the teachings were oral. To what extent they were written down. The thing that's important, I think, for Muslims to appreciate is that we should not equate the Injil with the Gospels of the New Testament. The Injil, for all intents and purposes, has been lost. Well, not all Jews do. There are some that do, and there's a movement within Judaism among some Jews to recognize Jesus as a prophet and even to recognize him as the Messiah. And these Jews say, well, there's no future Messiah yet to come. But I think the majority of Jews still would say he was not a prophet. Baptism is a ritual in Christianity in which a person is born anew, washed clean of his sins. It's a one-time thing, typically, in most churches. And depending upon which church, it can be done by just sprinkling a little water on the head, or in some churches you've got to be fully immersed. There's amazing similarity, actually, between Sahih Hadith and traditional Christian understanding of the end of times. In both religions, we have Jesus returning, peace be upon him. We have Jesus slaying the Antichrist in both religions. We have Jesus establishing a messianic rule in both religions. Though in the Christian religion, it's thought that that rule will last for 1,000 years. And in the Hadith, we're told variously it will be 7 years or 40 years. In fact, the description of the Messianic reign, there's a passage in Isaiah, in the Old Testament of the Bible, which most Christians believe refers to the Messianic reign. And it's this wonderful passage of juxtapositions where, you know, the lamb lies down with the lion and kids play with snakes and nobody harms anybody. And an extremely similar statement can be found in the Musnad of M.Div and Hanbal. No, they were not rejecting the idea that Jesus was crucified. They were accepting that. You know, I think most Christians read that passage and they read right over the words in it. The fact that Jesus said, you know, I finished the work that you gave me to do. Most Christians just read right over that and don't even stop to think, hey, wait a minute. If the work's complete, then what about the crucifixion? As to the second coming, that's a second set of work. Okay, in terms of that passage from Matthew, the issue is, was there a massive confusion of identity that took place? Because none of the writers about the crucifixion event were there. There's no eyewitness testimonial. So, was there a mix-up in identity, given that we have two men named Jesus? And that this was the appearance issue. Now, the Basilidians said no, you know, it was Simon of Cyrene who was crucified, and they specifically say that he was made to appear as though he were Jesus. Well, first of all, we need to make a distinction. Not all Christians or all Christian churches back Zionism 100%. This is something that we see primarily in the extreme Christian right. And the reason we see it in the extreme Christian right is because the extreme Christian right holds on to a doctrine called the rapture. Now, the concept of the rapture never existed anywhere in Christian thought or Christian writings prior to the 19th century. So it's a relatively new concept. The way it starts is a girl in Scotland, a young girl in Scotland, has a vision of people miraculously being lifted up into the sky, just as Jesus is descending to earth in the second coming. Well, Schofield bought into this vision and tied together his Schofield Reference Bible to try and support this vision. And this idea that people will miraculously ascend into heaven as Jesus is coming down to earth is known as the rapture. But you know, only the very select few will be taken up. But the thing is, if you're taken up in the rapture, then you're going to miss Armageddon. You're going to miss the war. You're going to miss the pestilence. You're going to miss the plague. You know, you're going to be up there in heaven. Well, earth is... So, They want